everyone, and welcome back to another book review. I am trying to beat the sun to get my last book review filmed today, so we are going to be efficient and quick, but I also had a really great time reading this book, so I want to cover everything that I want to cover in this book, and so we are going to be discussing and reviewing today Volume 2 in the History of Fashion and Costume series called The Medieval World. I got this book out of the library thinking that it was a teen book. I placed a hold on it to pick up, but then when I picked it up, I realized it was kind of a kid's book, but I would put it as like an upper grade level kid's book because there still is quite a bit of content in the book. It might actually be a teen book, I might be correct, but its label was placed in the kids section. So that was on me. And initially I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to read it, but after flipping through it, I figured it might be a really good introduction to my other medieval dress book that I got that is definitely for like adults. And I'm glad that I did read this because I think they got a lot of interesting information in here and it wasn't quite what I expected, so I had a really good time reading it. So the first thing to know is this book does not just contain itself to Western Europe. It actually covers all areas of the world. Of course, written records and ability to find archaeological evidence of the medieval era throughout all the world differs by region. So we have Europe 500 to 1000 in chapter 1. Chapter 2 is Europe 1000 to 1400, so the later half of the Middle Ages. Then we have Europe 1400 to 1500 in chapter 3, so kind of the Renaissance period. Chapter 4 is Africa and Asia, 500 to 1500, and then Oceania and the Americas, 500 to 1500. Another little nitpick maybe is, well, we are trying to cover all of the time period that we call medieval in Europe. I'm not sure that same time period has the same meanings in places like Asia and the Americas, where different things were happening at different paces, so that's just a minor nitpick. But overall, I think it was really interesting to see how people were dressing in various regions. I personally particularly liked the Europe section and the Asia section, and I think overall it was very, very interesting. So we do get into quite a bit of stuff. The book is very picture heavy or detailed heavy, but every page also has plenty of text as well. And something I find when reading books on the Middle Ages, having read a lot of books on medieval times or the Middle Ages, I don't know how to phrase that, over the last year and a half, is that you find a lot of connections between what you read. The first thing I noticed is actually, when I left it in the other room, but I was reading this book and I got to page 17 and I just read trades and crafts in the medieval manuscripts, and this picture was used in the book that I just read. I saw this picture reproduced here and I thought, wait, I've seen that before, and it was in a book that I had just read earlier this morning. So you start to see things again and again. Also, armor is covered in here, and I read a book a couple months ago, maybe 8 or 9 months ago at this point, on armor making, which is very, very useful. I read a book on the history of sheep, and wool making comes up again and again in this. So the more you read books on one topic, the more you start to see connections, which I find very rewarding and interesting. And I saw a lot, including a book that I read today where the illustration is repeated in here. So of course, Europe gets the bulk of this book because Middle Ages is what this focus is, but of course they're trying to also pull in what was happening at that same time period in the rest of the world as well. But the first 3 chapters are dividing like the first half of the Middle Ages, the second half of the Middle Ages, and then this like very end of the Middle Ages moving into the Renaissance. As mentioned, there is some emphasis on armor, so if you like that. I also found a lot of connections to my book on medieval knights and chivalry that I also read. We got this. I remember reading in another book that this was basically an arms race against guns, and guns won because we stopped wearing armor, at least armor like this. There were also some funny moments that I thought showed that nothing really changes in the world sometimes, and I'm going to read from page 20. First of all, this is peak male fashion. We should bring this back. Fashion changed repeatedly between the 12th and 15th centuries as wealthy young nobles experimented with outrageous costumes and hairstyles. Young nobles shocked their elders and were often criticized by the church. So, yes, shocking your elders by wearing outrageous clothing has been the thing for years. Something else that I really liked, and this is on page 30, this is probably my second favorite part, were these hats that were worn by women. And it reached a point where they had to actually raise the, here it is, by 1418, these hats had become so high that the doorways of Vincennes Castle in France had to be raised so that ladies could pass through them. And these were these ridiculous hats I say ridiculous, they were very much in style, of course, that women were wearing that would just get so high that it was becoming impractical, which also makes me wonder, who was the first woman who went through that doorway that couldn't fit, that led to them having to raise the doorway? Like the embarrassment of having to, I guess, crouch down because your hairstyle was so big. That must have been funny. We do have a good bit of information too on the Arab world, which was of course in communication and conflict. I almost said conflict, but then I was like, conflict's also the correct C word here, with Western Europe at this time. There's also a lot of information on the Mongols, which is interesting. We do have, of course, illustrations and documentation of what they wore as well. So this is in the Africa and Asia section. I also think we also get into North America a little bit as to what we were wearing. But again, some of these regions just have less documentation, although we do have documentation on this, on Central America. We have a lot of interesting things here. And I've seen some of this in museums before, which is really quite impressive. Here's a headdress that has been preserved right here. One minor critique I would have of this book is just the timeline in the back, where they just have like dates and events, but from all over the world. What I would have preferred to have seen is like all the dates on the side, and then one column for Europe, one column for Asia, one column for Africa, one column for Australia, whatever your sections are, to do it that way, instead of jumping between, okay, Europe and then this, but seeing it in like side by side, but from different regions, would probably help readers get a better view of what was happening at certain times in the world. The fact that this is only volume 2 of A History of Fashion and Costume makes me wonder what else is in this series, and overall I am glad that I read it because it gave me a really good introduction to the topic. Now I feel like I have a little bit of a background. I can go read that book that's more targeted towards adults and probably enjoy that. Not that I didn't enjoy this one, this was actually very fun and interesting, but that one's just going to be a little bit higher level, so I think I will enjoy that one more, and I'll have the background of this book behind me going into it. So I don't know if I can recommend, because I feel like there's going to be other books aimed at adults if you are an adult on medieval costume and fashion that I will probably wind up recommending more, but this was an enjoyable read and I am glad that I had it. Or if you have a young reader in your life or someone who's maybe late elementary school, this could be a fun introduction for them that's age appropriate. It also includes a global view, which is always very interesting to see, and I like seeing the global view as well. If you have any thoughts or comments, please leave it in the comment section down below. I love to see your comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.